We're really excited to dive into this. This is such a common challenge that I'm hearing from firm owners. So I was really excited when Piros reached out, wanted to partner, wanted to talk about how any firm can really improve the process that they have for managing their details and managing their families. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tyler Sumala. I am the founder of Growth Detect. Growth Detect is, for the most part, a weekly newsletter that's delivered on every Sunday, sharing strategies to help you, win the projects that you want with clients that you love for fees that you deserve. That is the goal here. That's what we want to do for architects. But joined primarily by Maya and Ross. Maya, you are the head of marketing. You are the product marketing manager. You are all marketing at Piros. Is that right?
Yeah, I lead marketing at Piros. It's a great time. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And also a deep background in the A&E industry, which
Yeah.
is fun.
Yeah. Spent a long time at Bluebeam.
Yeah, which I'm sure everyone knows what Bluebeam is, so that's good.
Yeah.
And then Ross, we have our resident recovering architect in the room, and also the head of sales at Piros. But give us a little bit of introduction to you and your background.
Hey everyone, yeah, Ross Wagner, head of sales here at Pirros, and came from the industry as well. I originally was in Chicago, so for the Midwest folks in the call, and the firm I was at moved me out to the San Francisco office. I did mostly high-rise residential projects and higher education projects, a lot of technical design work, a lot of construction administration. This was over 10 years ago. Unfortunately, Pirros did not exist. I wish it did, because that would have been a huge game changer for me back then. But then eventually, like anyone who moves to the Bay Area, I went to the software side of things, and I was working on a project during CA where I was introduced to PlanGrid, a company that, if you guys aren't familiar, does like mobile collaboration. That was in 2014, and then I ended up just being so excited about software that I joined PlanGrid. And then from there, went to Autodesk because Autodesk bought PlanGrid. And earlier this year, I joined Pirros because I wanted to get back into a super fun, exciting, company like Pirros. And it just blew my mind when I first saw it. So I'm very excited to be here today, and also just to chop it up with Tyler and Maya.
Yeah, for sure. So excited that you're here, Ross, and you're the only so far other recovering architect that I've also met that has sales experience. So
Great.
it's gonna be good on this. My initial reaction, by the way, I first saw Piros in action last week, and I was completely blown away. Maya knows this because she was on the call with me, but like afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, this is
It's true.
really probably the best product that I've seen in A&E in a long time. We're not going to talk about that towards the end, like towards the second half of the conversation. The first half, we really just want to talk about, what are these common challenges that firms are experiencing, and what can any firm do apart from software, apart from these, like what processes can firms implement to actually make this better? So that's what we're going to get into, and then we will absolutely show, better and faster ways that you can do this with Piros. But at the front, we just want to front load this with value for anyone here, right? We want to make it better and easier to manage those details and manage those families. So Ross, I'm curious. And by the way,
Yeah.
let me pause for a second. Anyone that's been part of these webinars knows we love these are casual. I mean, it's only Ross and myself and Maya that are here on the screen, but don't hesitate to drop in questions. If Ross is okay with it, I will kindly, in a Midwestern way, interrupt him whenever possible. Ask questions to do that, but this is meant to be, engaging, casual. We want people to get the help that they need and the feedback that they, want to give. So drop in questions as you have them along the way. We also have some polls to get a better sense for what's in the room that are coming up. But Ross, just to start us off, I mean, you talk to so many firms about how they're managing their details, how they're managing their families. What are the problems that you hear about most often from these firms?
Well, it's kind of wild, but like no matter what firm size you're at today, or what type of like architecture you focus on, or maybe even discipline, if you're doing multi-disciplines with structural, they all have so many different ways of approaching content, right? They all approach it differently. And what it really stems down to is just the lack of capacity to basically manage all this content. Because there is if you think of how long some of your firms probably have been using Revit, and even like other design authoring tools like AutoCAD, there's just a ton of, data that you've built over decades, right? And everyone has their own way of organizing it, whether it be in a container file, in like different templates, in a shared drive, or even sometimes like the database of a content manager. And so everyone is a snowflake. I know it's a common term, but it is kind of wild that everyone approaches it differently, but they all have the same problems. The same problems that we hear on our end is really first about quality, right? Like how do we bring more quality to our like standards and how we can take that to the next level. The second pillar is really around just efficiency, like the speed of finding what they're looking for. It's kind of wild to think that like today there's still processes of navigating different files, shared drives, and it takes time. Or even bugging people around the studio. Hey, where is this? What team built this detail over X amount of years ago? And so that's the second pillar. And then the third that we always hear is really around like onboarding and adoption and really what it comes down to is mentorship, kind of like bridging the gap between senior and junior folks at the firm so that like people can collaborate together and learn from one another. Because just transparently, I came out of the recession and there was a gap of people who would be my mentor, that would teach me certain things, and there were people who were above that have that were in like the more kind of principal realm, and they didn't have time to teach me. So it certainly is the three pillars that we see today, but they all are approaching the problem differently.
Yeah, that's such an important point on the adoption front, is that I've still yet, so far, in whatever it's been, like 15 years in architecture, I've still yet to meet an architect that isn't busy, right?
Right.
Every single architect is busy. And mentorship is usually not something that's built, like that's pre-built, right? That's already blocked off as time to do those things. And so I think there's two components to that. Like, obviously there's the component of like, we need to figure out how to make time for it. There's another component that's just like the systems that already exist. They need to be user friendly, right? People need to be able to understand them on their own first, and then kind of get support as they need it along the way. But while we're diving into this, I'm curious if we can get a temperature inside the room, Maya, if you're able to pull it up. But like, I'm curious to know how everyone is solving and managing their firm's content today, right? So details and families, like what does that process actually look like for everyone here? Is that something that's local? Is it in a Revit container? Are you already using some kind of content management system? Is it in people's heads? That's what it was for me, for sure, when I was very inefficiently doing it. Or is there something that's not captured there? So let us know. But yeah, so the pillars that you were talking about, Ross, you were saying basically quality, speed, and adoption. These are the three main pain points that you're hearing about. Which one have you found to be like most painful, kind of most pressing for firms the majority of the time?
I mean, they all are important and painful, right? In some ways, but I think like the one that I do hear probably the most is the speed and the efficiency, right? Like you said, everyone is doing so much at once. No one's like not busy at a firm. And even think of it this way: if you have, for example, a firm that doesn't have a dedicated like BIM manager, then you're having someone who's like a project architect also, in the moonlight be a BIM manager, right? And so like the speed of just saving that time to find what they're looking for, if it's that project architect or if it's the production team or people on the actual projects, like that would be so much time savings that they could then spend time doing actually the work that they should be doing, which is collaborating on their projects to make sure that the design intent outcome happens and is as fluid as possible. But a lot of times there's just administrative stuff that adds up, and that speed really can take a toll if it's not efficient.
Yeah, I was wondering if, as you were saying that, Ken had the perfect answer over here in Q&A. We said we need an all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
Saw
this
that.
is yeah, thanks, Ken. I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's like, hey, we're doing actually a little bit of everything, which might be more to this point. Okay, so cool. We have the answers up. Is it just us that can see it, Maya, or is it everyone that can see it?
Everyone can see this.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I'm hoping. Yeah.
So
Amazing.
Local and shared files taking the top. We got Revit container files, but actually just going in order of the questions, right? And we've got about 12 people, here that have already a content management system in place. And then thankfully, there's only only a couple of people that are just like me, right? They're capturing it all in their heads just so that we can spend extra time, relearning it every time we do it, right? Ross, what's your reaction to this? Does this surprise you?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
This is exactly what, we hear on our end at Pirros. And like I said, though, like I'm not surprised that there's a mix of answers because everyone is approaching it somewhat different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing to remember for the next webinar that we do together, Maya, is like, let's have an all of the above option.
We need an all of the above
All
option.
of the
Yes,
above
thank you,
option.
Ken.
Ken, yeah, thank
Yes.
you. We will
Yes.
heard and executed for sure. So, with these problems, Ross, we all
Yeah.
know. So, things take time. It's hard to see the impacts of this kind of in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Because there's also not a firm that I think truly believes that they're doing everything in the best way, right?
Right.
But what are the actual impacts of these content management, systems or processes or non-existent processes that we have in place today? What's the impact that that's having on the business in your experience?
Well, there's a lot of impacts, and a lot of times they're felt even downstream of the project after like the phases when you'd be using things like content and details and families, right? First, I would say the biggest is actually you know relationships and quality, right? Because like if you are potentially doing a bunch of details and they're from like older projects that you're grabbing, or if you're maybe having some details that you're pulling from a product that's like 7 or 8 years old and it's out of code compliance, or maybe you're using a family that is not approved for like a standard component that you're hoping to bring into a project downstream, that can be pretty friction heavy with like potential RFIs that arise once the actual pre-con and construction phases occur. And then obviously that in turn affects the quality of your work. But then, if it delays the schedule, then your clients and even maybe the other stakeholders you work with, like structural engineers and maybe even MEP engineers, are all feeling that delay. And that delay can hurt businesses, right? And they can hurt your relationships at the end of the day with clients and other stakeholders. So that's like one thing. The other thing that I've also heard is really around retention. Like it's kind of wild, but like all these firms that have maybe tedious workflows or, things that are bottlenecks, you'll find that people who are like more on the production side of things are frustrated, right? And maybe they're talking to another firm that has a lot more fluid of a way of doing things, and they have a friend over there that's referring them saying, "Hey, we can increase like your pay, and we're a lot more streamlined." And then retention is such a big thing in the industry right now. And then when you retain these people, of course, like there's so many downstream benefits of that, of like institutional knowledge, like culture. And that's another thing that, we definitely see on our end as a big focus within the industry. And then the other piece I would say is just like the recurring kind of maintenance costs. Think of like the overhead it takes to maintain content. It actually is pretty wild if you add it up. First of all, if you have a full-on BIM manager, that's a salary, right? But then if you don't have the capacity for a BIM manager, then think of like the small little death by paper cuts of someone just spending a bunch of time every week for 30 minutes to an hour of maintaining what this content database can get really out of hand pretty quickly. And the saying like garbage in, garbage out, like then it doesn't provide value. Then everyone's like feeling that pressure and that pain. So those are kind of some three things that we see on our end, Tyler. I know that was a long-winded answer, but those are things I hear.
I think what's important about that is that it's so often that as we're evaluating our own, I feel like, inefficiencies in our business, where we think about it and feel it the most is kind of like in that first degree, first degree connection, right? So
Yep.
if you like, and what I love about, I don't love it, but I think what's important about what you're saying is that it's actually the downstream effects that sometimes are more problematic, because everyone can think of and relate to the fact that it took me 30 minutes to find this detail that I should have been able to find in 30 seconds.
Right.
And you usually think about it there in that moment, like I'm annoyed that it took me that long just then to do it. And then to your point, RFIs down the line, right? It's going to happen again. You're going to have to go through that exact same process again. And in that moment, you think about it just as being immediate to that, but there's actually, why did this happen? Because there's a problem even further up the line as to why
Totally.
that exists. So it's something that you feel at different moments. And I think in that moment, you almost think that it's like an isolated thing,
Hmm.
but in reality, it's part of a much larger kind of systemic issue
Totally.
that the
No,
firm is having.
that's a great point. And I will say, like, everything you just said right there, Tyler, it's a reactive response,
Yeah.
right? Because like if you're feeling it downstream, well, at that point, like all of the billable hours you had, maybe you're hitting the client or hitting your business, weeks down the line. And people who are like the business owners and partners of these firms actually in the moment don't know it until it's too late.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a huge problem within the industry. And so something that like, we're really focused on here at Piros is actually approaching it in a proactive manner, right? Like how you can get the visibility of what people are doing so that like you can stay on top of people using the right standards that you're trying to implement long term.
I feel like this idea of being proactive is such a mark of, I think, the new generation of software that's hitting like the architecture, the A&E market today,
Yeah,
because it's been so difficult. I would say difficult and maybe not even well executed up to this point to actually access that information that you're talking about and to
totally.
have like, almost like a real time look into the things that really matter the most so that you can be proactive. Because even
Mhm.
before, like the version of being proactive was kind of like being aware,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
gathering that information somewhere and still having to kind of pull it together and like manually pull it together in some kind of fashion, but like you were at least part of the process in some way, right?
Totally.
It was,
Yeah.
but now to your point, you have all these things, and so I know that Kua had asked a great question that we will get to, talking about basically, we often see standard details always need some tweaking. So like, what does that process look like? Definitely something that we're going to touch on. And
Yeah.
then Krista was saying, I find more and more that I prefer live cuts for details, which makes me sad about the number of hours I've spent developing a detail library. More of the time these days is spent on improving families. Yes,
Mhm.
it's kind of like it's the new version, right? So that I can adapt them into these live cuts. I'm sure that there's a lot of people, Krista, that can relate to that, and I think that's one of
Totally.
the great things about Piros, right? We'll dive into that, but like it's not
100%.
just details now because we have Revit. Everyone's using families. What is
Yep.
it? It's the new more complex version of all of the details that we already didn't have time to manage before. now we have,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
now we have families with it too. Well, let's talk about this. I mean, so we have the common problems with quality and speed and adoption, and that's
Mhm.
causing the first degree impacts that we all know, which is just it's causing it to take longer than what we want it to. But then
Yep.
there's these downstream kind of systemic impacts where it's just capturing our time, it's capturing our quality, it's capturing our reputation, just kind of further and further down that line, and
Mhm.
adding more risk to our business. So
Yep.
what are the foundations of a good solution, like a good process in place, even from a manual standpoint? Like, what do people need to have in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think the first kind of vector with that would be the people, like designating the right people at your firm to take this, and run with it, right? If you don't have like a committee of people who are like the nomenclature is different at every firm, like a Revit committee, a standards committee, you name it, like um we need to that's foundation number one, right? And I wouldn't say it's like a always a one man or woman job. It's something that we should definitely have a committee to go through the QA process because sometimes it's good to have another pair of eyes on that, right? So don't put it all on one person. Definitely try to find a crew of folks that could help out there. So that's kind
I
of
feel like we're super famous as an industry for putting it whatever we can on one
right.
if possible.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
spread it out. Okay.
I think it's okay to have like one leader, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's fine. But like as long as there's like a committee that is, also helping out that leader, it's definitely a game changer in that front. And I will add that like if you don't have someone like that or a team at your firm, definitely think about it. But also people who are willing to just really be innovative and take your kind of firm's digital maturity to the next level. Because that's kind of like this process that is so critical in the industry today is like, yeah, you might have on-prem, share drives and so forth. But like, what is your strategy to get to cloud? What is your strategy then like augment what your cloud data looks like to then eventually get to the point where you have really clean data, like eventually maybe a digital twin, which would be ideal, to like get data that's in the model back to you so you can make better business decision outcomes. That's a whole other discussion we can talk about. So I think start with the committee and start with the people. The second
Yeah.
thing would be prioritize your content, right? So that's the second vector is like, what is the biggest friction point today? Is it details? Great. Like if our details are really hard to find and our library is pretty minimal, that's probably a great place to start. Is it families? Sure. Like if the families are getting a little out of hand, and then maybe it's a subset of families that you want to get better at, whether it be just typical families that are like walls and doors, some of those system ones, or maybe you're trying to say, hey, no, we need more bespoke families that are like chairs and desks and other things. Like think about that, right? Like that just start simple. I would say, I always say don't try to boil the ocean. Just start with one charter and then you'll probably see, oh, this works with this committee and in this kind of process, and then expand from there.
Yeah.
So
When it
yeah,
when it comes to okay, so when it comes to prioritizing, I'm curious if Maya, we can pull up this other one. Let's get another temperature in the room while we're moving through these other pillars that you have.
yeah.
But in terms of, do people what do you have today? Like in terms of a typicals library, like is that a common thing that firms in here have? Like do you have a standard library in place at your firm today? Because that's definitely part of that prioritization, right? It's going to make it at least a little bit easier for people to find what they need. But what else goes beyond that?
Yeah, I think the next would be just the workflow. Like, what are you trying to solve? And we talked about this earlier, Tyler, where it's like, yeah, you're trying to improve your speed, but is it the speed of finding things? Is it the speed of, vetting things? Is it the speed of, updating those details or families to make sure they're up to speed with your standards? There's different workflows that every firm has in terms of what they actually want to solve too. So once you get the people, once you get the content to prioritize, then the next thing is the workflow. So that's the third vector. And then I got a fourth one, by the way, Tyler.
Yeah, go for it.
So the fourth one would be, in my mind, the output. So like once you start implementing all this, how are you going back to our conversation around being proactive, looking at the real time efficiency gains, right? So that you can say, hey, this is working, and then you can double down on it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead. You get the
Well,
pull up
almost
here.
almost even less than, well, I'd say more than the output that you're talking about is like there needs to be a feedback loop, right?
Totally. Yeah.
More to I think what Krista was mentioning, also what Kua was mentioning, right? It's like
Yeah.
there needs to be and also the point of the people pillar that you were talking about. Like there needs to be some kind of feedback loop or else these are going to go dry, and that even though you might have a workflow that's good, all that you're getting out of that workflow is actually just things that are still outdated, right?
100%.
And so that's an issue. All right, so we've got 88% that have some kind of standards library in place. I think that's good, right? Because that's just
It's great.
at least like we have something. We have some kind of area where we are pushing things that we think we probably kind of want to use more often. We've got a soft take on that. And I know we have another one, and this I feel like this kind of tees it up. All those pillars that you're talking about, Ross, because if you I think everyone here probably has some kind of thing in place, right? Ken was talking about the all of the above option, right? We have something in place. The question is, how confident are you that we pull someone from your team, junior employee,
Right.
ask them to find something? How confident are you that they can actually execute on that? And I think this is such a good question to ask yourself, not just for, we're talking about details and families today, but this is the true litmus test
Totally.
for understanding, how optimized and efficient your system actually is, right? So think of a junior employee, they need to find a detail and place it on the right sheet. What's your confidence level that they can do this efficiently, and not just efficiently, not just fast, but also accurately, right? Are we talking low, medium, or a high? If you're probably looking out at your office right now, like grab one of those, junior employers, junior employees that have their headphones in, they're working hard on some kind of CD set right now, right? Picture them trying to find something. Really curious to see what is. But what are you expecting to see here, Ross, based on your experience?
I probably will see it in the middle, right? I think like the nice thing that I see at firms is there's always someone who's incredibly tech forward. And it's a great opportunity to show someone who might be more on the earlier side of their career to like take the lead on something and really, make a name for themselves in their firm. So that's where I'm gonna say maybe it lands, but I am curious to see what the results are once they do come in.
Okay, well, let's check it
We have
out
a,
here.
we have a drum roll. I feel like
Yeah.
we.
Drum roll.
All right.
All right.
Okay. Cool. Yes. See, I didn't want, like, as someone that doesn't have these conversations all of the time, I thought that more people were going to lean towards low.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to see. We've got an even split between low and medium. We've got the high achievers in the room. Drop into the Q&A. Let us know. Let us know what's working so well for you now that have high confidence. We're gonna grab someone. We're gonna grab someone from the team, and they're gonna know exactly how to do it. So you've got good systems in place, and hopefully,
Yeah. And I do want to add something there, Tyler, is that like,
Yeah.
whether you have low confidence, medium confidence, or high confidence, if someone takes the lead on it and that's more on like the junior side, it's so incredibly important that they have like a principal or partner or executive sponsor
Yeah.
knowing that they're working on it, right?
Mm.
That visibility, yes, they might not be in the weeds of what this looks like, but they should be aware and like have, their either biweekly or monthly updates as to where they're hitting kind of these goals to improve their standards. Like it's always critical to have like a leadership sponsor.
That's a great point. Yes. They need to be aware of it. They need to be engaged. I would say don't make it like a monthly check-in at the beginning. Like do that thing weekly.
Totally. Yeah.
uh, to keep that progress moving forward. But well, let's talk about, I mean, what does it look like,
Mhm.
for a firm that's using Piros, and they have high confidence in this, right? They're confident in the way that this is able to be used by their team, that someone can find the information that they need. Curious to see like how does Piros solve this?
Yeah. I mean, would it make sense for me to walk through Piros at this point, Tyler? Is that what you're asking for? Or do you want me
Yeah,
to?
I'd say so. Yeah, let's see this beautiful piece of
Okay.
software that we've got.
Let me go ahead and see if I can share my screen here. Uh, let me just, are you able to see this right here, right now?
There we are.
Almost, yes. And then I think, Ross, as you go through and show folks what is here, I think many folks have perhaps seen other things or are wondering about other things. Patricia asked a particularly good question about what do we think about content catalog, right? And so maybe as you go through this, we could touch on thoughts about what else is out there as well.
Totally. Yeah. Great. Well,
Not to
just
put you on the spot at all, Ross. No, I'm just kidding.
no, that's perfect. So, at the end of the day, the way I like to think of why Piros has grown so quickly is because of the fact that the appetite across the industry is really hoping to take their content to the next level. And what we do is we are able to be a centralized hub for everything that you've done for your content historically at your firm to then go through the process of vetting and improve your quality. And then long term, really get that output of efficiency gains so people can find what they're looking for very quickly. The name of our platform is actually a space called content intelligence. And so, this is really a big, space for us to spearhead because what we've seen, like you saw in the polls earlier, is that there are either share drives or container files or some of these content managers are more just like databases to manually tag certain things, and they do still require a little level of upkeep, right? And so on the Piros end of it, we do a lot of automation for you, leveraging a ton of intelligence to really just help you find what you're looking for very quickly, but also help build the standards and that quality as well. And then as you do those things together, you'll find that onboarding and adoption pick up with it. They're all kind of tied, right? So just to confirm, everyone can see my screen here, Tyler? You can see
Yeah,
my
looks great.
screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, the way Piros works is we organize, and by the way, you're seeing our detail manager. The same concept applies for our family manager too. So everything I'll show you today, you can also do with family management, but I'm just going to show you the detail workflows today since it's just, on the screen here, but happy to also show what we can do on the family side if there's questions around it. But the way we organize content, and in this case, details within Piros, is in two primary buckets, right? So the first bucket is going to be your typical detail bucket. So this could be everything that I saw on the polls were container files, templates, maybe some of those details on a shared drive. You can type in like a door head detail, right? You can type in windowsill. Think of this as like a very just intelligent Google search into your details altogether. And keep in mind, everything that you're seeing here is I'm on a browser, right? This has a bidirectional sync into my Revit project. So if I pull up any of these, detail cards, they're all vectorized. I could download the PDF, but I could just stage it for download so that then pulls right into my Revit project very quickly. Okay, so that's the typical detail workflow. Now, let's just say there is, for example, a very unique condition that maybe your firm has done in the past, and there's a project team that's out there that recalls spending a ton of hours putting together a detail, and they know it's out there, but they can use basically what would be like a prompt keyword search of what they're looking for. Let's say it's a roof parapet detail with a metal panel and a curtain wall, right? So I type that in, and this is where like the workflow can really break down here. So in my typical bucket, the first way we organize it, it's not going to be part of your standard library, right? Now this circumstance, this is when project teams are asking around the office, they're bugging senior staff while they're busy as well. They're putting it on their Teams or email threads, whatever you use for your medium for that. Or worst case, they can't find it and they start drawing it from the ground up again, spending a ton of those billable hours in the project. So that's where the second bucket comes into play here, where I have the all details bucket, okay? Now, these are the harvested details historically at your firm. So then that detail that you did X number of years ago, it's actually right in front of you here. And that's what I was looking for. And so when you open up the detail card, you're going to probably notice that at the top here, parapet was a part of that. Okay, so that actually helps with like the search engine, which it brings it up to the top there, right? Think of like when you're looking for Google, they bring up what's the top with what you're probably most looking for, right? We have it at the top with the parapet, but what our actual search engine intelligence is doing is it's actually scanning everything through the construct of the detail. So you can see we have actually something called computer vision where we can see, oh, there's, a curtain wall, there's, metal panel. We even have industry abbreviations baked into our search logic. So I typed in metal, the full word, but this has MTL, or if I was to do the same thing for galvanized, we could type in galvanized, but it would recognize that GALV is the abbreviation for galvanized. You could also search for keynotes or spec sections, and then all the metadata as well is searchable. So that's the other thing that, when it comes to Piros, those efficiency gains of finding what you're looking for really, really help out. So that's the search. And then of course you're just one click away from going to the overall sheet that detail came from, right? And a lot of times there's adjacent details that might be just as relevant that you want to pull into that next project. And you can see the extracted detailed cards from the sheet here on the right.
This is where I got really excited when I saw this for the first time. Before is because you kind of went through the two, I think two of the most common scenarios, right? One is finding something that's used often, and one is finding something that's unique.
Yeah.
But more so, to your point, it doesn't usually end there, because if that one unique or even typical detail was used, then there's probably kind of an association, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other details that were related to it. And I feel like that's sometimes something that gets lost, especially for me, like when you have the file, the file
Right.
set aside, right? Is that either you have to kind of individually click into each one and see,
Yeah.
right? Or well, actually that's pretty much the primary thing, right? You have to click into each one and see if that's what it is. But here it's already associated with the origin, right? With the source of where it came
Exactly.
from. And so everything from what I can see is like it's interconnected, which is
Oh, yep.
kind of amazing, right? That's the part that's hard to do in folder management, right?
Exactly.
In folder
Yeah.
management, there's no interconnectedness, right? There's just the bucket. There's just
Exactly.
the folder itself. And I think that's that's a tremendous value to be able to connect the data across different silos that they're in today.
100%. Yeah. And I will add that, like, everything just as it is like in Revit, where you can click into call outs and stuff, you can see there's like backwards and forwards detail call outs. So I can go forward into where actually that parapet is happening. And that is all hyperlinked. So you can see here in the references, I can go back into that detail there, but I also can go backwards into the sheet. So everything's interconnected for you to navigate and find things very quickly. So it's a great call out there, Tyler.
And there's two questions that I'm sure are in the minds of most of the people here, right? One is related to, I think, what Kua had asked before, is like, well, how do we keep them updated, right?
Yeah.
What's that process look like in terms, like, if you have the people group and you have a group that's devoted to making sure things are up to code or up to the standards, up to the quality standards that you have at your firm, how does that process actually work? And I think the second thing is like, how'd you get all these in here? was that an easy process? Did I have to redraw everything? Like, what does that actually look like? Because what I love about, Piros is it's so simplified, right? You make it look easy. I know that it's not, but the software makes it look easy, which is like,
Yeah.
how did you do it? Right? How did we get all this data into here? Because every firm, those folders that you were talking about, the information is there. It's just not easily found.
100%. And I'll actually probably just start with your second question and then go to your first.
Okay,
so
cool.
Like, how do you actually get these details in the Pirros? And it's very simple. We all know the drill here. If you have a shared drive, right, you can drag and drop your projects into here. But we also integrate with Autodesk. We're an Autodesk partner, right? And so we integrate with Autodesk Construction Cloud or BIM 360. And you can bring in your projects here and designate the ones that you want to bring into Piros. Hypothetically, let's just say that this is the one that's the typical. If you have a template file or a container file, you can label it as a typical, right? And then that would be brought into that first bucket we went through originally, right? But you can bring in as many projects as you've done in the past. And we've actually seen some firms bring in like 100 projects in a day, because what we actually do on our end in our platform is we aren't bringing the whole model into our software. We're actually just extracting some pretty clean elements, right? So we're bringing in those drafting views, those detail views, those legends and schedules and sheets. And then also on the family side, we'll be bringing in system families, which is a huge value add to carry from product to product. We all know that takes a ton of time. And then also loadable families that you can designate by categorization of family type. Now, I want to just be clear on one big thing that we do in terms of like our platform's intelligence. When we digest your project, we are going to be deduplicating your details and your families. And so what our system recognizes is, let's just say a detail that's up to basically a 90% match. And the reason this is so important and a huge differentiator of like how Piros can, and then why we've grown so quickly, is that those libraries or shared drives or content databases can get really out of hand with redundant content, right? the same information. And it's hard to then, group them together. And so what we do is we group that together for you, knowing that that's up to a 90% match, basically. So that's one thing we're going to do. And I saw the question earlier is another big thing that we're going to do as well is we're going to extract every detail view. So let me just double down on what that means. If you have a live 3D section that you've detailed and annotated on top of, we're going to bring it into our platform. We're going to digest it and turn it into a reusable drafting view on your next project, which historically, when I was an architect, that was a nightmare process where you're trying to toggle all the 2D elements, copy it, not select anything 3D, bring it in, maybe upgrade the model. It just was a nightmare process. So
there's nothing worse than trying to turn a 3D element into a 2D element.
Yeah.
That is not fun. Well, I'm curious. What was something that popped up while you were talking about that? It was So you're saying we almost as if it's people, but this is an intelligent system, right? So like when you're pulling it in, it's also naming it? Is it intentionally categorizing it and organizing it in a way that will already be interconnected, or is this something that still needs to be done manually?
Great question. Yeah, and it's not we don't like a bunch of little minions in the back doing it for you. It is our software and our tool doing it for you.
Sure.
So thanks for clarifying that, Tyler. But yeah, we are like our software is going to basically start bringing in some default filters and parameters, of course, from where those details and families are coming from. Obviously, the versioning. We're going to always honor the version that project came from. So it's, obviously easier to always go forward than Revit's limiting on going backwards, right? But we're also going to, extract all those different elements. And then you can even add like component tags of what's within those details too. Now, everything below here, there's a little faint gray line, but like everything below is completely configurable to your firm, right? So this is where we can add custom elements of not only with the search, but apply another level of filters that can allow you to slice and dice the details or families as you need, whether it's like you do multiple project types, right? You could have, I'm about to start a K-12 project here. I need to filter by my K-12 details, or maybe I have a building material that's wood frame construction instead of like a concrete or steel. You filter by wood frame for K-12, and then you really file down those details effectively on top of the layered search. So these are tailored to your firm, and we obviously can work with you on making sure that that's in a good place.
Cool. That's awesome.
And then the other thing I wanted to quickly share, and I know we're time is of the essence here, but on the management tab here, you mentioned this earlier, Tyler, but what is the feedback loop? How do I update details, right? And this is a huge part of what Pirros, does is we allow a way of a feedback loop and collaboration between the project teams. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, in each detail, you can always go in and you can mark it up, right? You can, use the markups how you need. You can mention your colleagues, right? I can say, Tyler, see new code. Once you do that, you'll get like in-app notifications, right? You'll get new email notifications if you have those set. And then basically what this allows you to do is this is going to be, let's just say this is one of your typical details. It's going to be tied to what would be the single source, library file that you're linked to bidirectionally with Pirros. And if you go ahead, Tyler, and you update this detail to the new code, you would resolve the flag. But I also want to be clear here on you update in Revit. It's just as simple as what we call a sync to central, right? Where you just go ahead and hit sync. Let's just say I updated this detail here, and then it'll bring it back into Pirros as the new updated detail. And then everyone who's been a part of this correspondence here, and then anyone who's actually recently downloaded that detail will be notified that their detail's out of date.
Wow.
So
okay.
If you're, and
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's being proactive for you. We were talking about being proactive before. It's like, well, you don't even have to now.
Exactly.
It's going to do it for you. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's another thing, because it's hard to, like, when you do update a detail, a lot of times we see firms just like mentioning the whole office on Teams or just email spam everyone that these are the new typicals, and we can give you that real time notification and insights.
Yeah.
The other thing we'll do for you as well, and this is another really nice tool, is what we call Pirros suggestions. Now, the way this works is whenever you start uploading a handful of your products to Pirros, we're going to start recognizing themes, Tyler. So like, for example, I can see here that this grab bar attachment detail has been actually used on 10 different projects. Okay. Now, these are all different project types. Some are even different Revit versions. Some have different names. And you can even see some have different markups. But this is what we're recognizing up to basically an 80 to 90% match. And this is basically our platform and our intelligence telling you, hey, Tyler, it's in your best interest to promote one of these to be a typical detail to help build that library over time with you, right? And a lot of times this is like a whole full-time job, but we can recognize the themes that, hey, this is used so often, it's not part of your standard library yet. Let's make it part of the typical library, and we help you give those insights and do the work for you.
That's awesome. And there's a few questions that popped up. Is it okay if we dive into some of these?
Please, let's do it.
Brian, hey Brian. So what kinds of extraneous fill, line, etc. patterns and types and other families get created when live details are converted to drafting views?
So that's a great question, Brian. So I guess what you're asking is what types of, it's basically whatever you've used at your firm, right? So if you have the standards that are coming from a typical detail, we're going to bring in those standard components into your new project and make sure that they're consistent. If you have, some older standards, there's a level of governance that you can actually put on those projects that might, prevent people from downloading details. So you basically can prevent those folks to not bring in old components. So there's a level of regulation that you can do there. I'll show you quickly how that works, Brian, where if you have this project that, let's just say it's like 7 years old, you can basically pull it up. And once you open it, there's a way to make it as for reference only, so that maybe it has old components that you don't bring into your new project or old details that are out of code compliance. But if you have a typical one that you bring in a new project, it's going to bring in those latest standards of those components. Not sure if that answers your question, but that's what we do on our end.
Cool. And then, does Piros check compatibility of the details with previous versions of Revit? So, did you just address that a little bit?
Yeah, so that a little bit, I lightly said that. So every single, detail has its story, right? But like if you bring in a detail from like an older project, I mentioned this briefly, but we're always going to honor the detail, or sorry, the Revit version and year that came from, right? Now, if you were to update and bring that detail into the new project, obviously it will update that detail, but it won't update it within the typical library that we have within Pirros. But I will say here that, if you ever want to go into one of these details that are similar, you'll notice that this is a typical detail, but these are 9 similar details that might have different Revit versions used over time. So for example, this accessible laboratory one, you can kind of see when it's been reused or upgraded from other projects. And the other thing I'll just say while I'm kind of on this topic here is every single detail has its historical context. So as you go through the process of QAing details, maybe updating components and code compliance, you'll notice that on the left here, we have a history where you can see that these are the different versions of that detail over time. Right now, this is the typical one that is prominent for the firm. But if I ever go into, for example, this one that was in 2024, I can actually compare it with the later one or the recent one and see what has changed, right? So it gives you that audit trail that is so critical to know what has changed, who changed it. And really today that doesn't really exist very well. And so that's something that we also provide for you.
Okay, that's awesome. And then we're going to keep answering questions because Brian had another one there and Ahmad has one too. While we do that though, Maya and Ross, where do people go if they want to learn more about Piros? Where can they go to continue this conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. The most obvious answer is on our website, so Pirros.com. And so you guys are more than welcome to go on there. there is a request a demo page where you'll be able to talk to us about exactly how Piros can apply to your firm. There have been some questions about pricing and stuff, and that's exactly the kind of thing that we can talk and discuss with you based on the specific contexts that you have. You can also email me. I'll drop my email in the chat, and you can get routed to us that way too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely reach out to the team because something I want to talk about. Let's answer a few more questions, Ross. But I definitely want to hear about this. Something that's so core to all of the software that's being launched in the industry today is adoption, right? This is a beautiful looking software, but at the end of the day, even though it is user friendly, it's like people still need to know how to use it. They still need to be onboarded to it. And so I'm curious as to how Piros handles that too. Ahmad had a great question for all of the security czars here, right? Like, where's the detail? Where are they kept? Is it in Piros server? Is it somewhere else?
That's a great question. So we are AWS, very similar to like Autodesk Construction Cloud. Like I said, we're partners of theirs, and so it is a cloud-based server.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then I think so. Brian had jumped back in. I'm guessing so. He had said, more geared to say when it converts a live 3D wall element into a section to lines and fill patterns, which I think I remember you were talking about that. It's like it's intelligent enough that it's going to make these conversions for it. What does that look like?
Yeah, let me quickly show you what that looks like. So basically here, you can see that this is a detail view and that this is a drafting view, right? So this is a live section 3D cut. And in here, this was drawn on top of like a slab, right? And so we extracted this, and you'll notice that it's a little bit different where I can stage these 2D elements for download. So on the, basically when you bring this into your new project, if there's a similar condition or moment, and maybe it might be a little bit different sizing wise, at least you're getting 80 to 90% of the way there, and it'll plug it in as a drafting view that you could reuse later. So that is an extracted 3D view here. Good question.
That's awesome. And Patricia, thank you. Yeah, we use Piros at our firm, has been very helpful for us. So busy having you been able to explode its full potential, but just for organizing, having a quick live bear details, it's been amazing. So that's awesome to hear, Patricia. Love to hear that. So curious on what you do for adoption, and then what kind of impacts are you seeing? I mean, Patricia just dropped it in there, but like I'm curious, like what are the impacts that you're seeing from the users, and what kind of benefits is it providing for these firms?
Totally. Yeah. I think one thing that obviously is a direct impact we talked about earlier is just massive efficiency gains, right? Finding those details very quickly, cataloging them in the right way intelligently, and helping you build those libraries in a standard format. And then the impacts obviously is better quality, right? And in building the libraries where you feel confident in it. And then the other thing that I do want to quickly touch on, Tyler, that I know you kind of crunch for time here, but we have like the whole piece that is the onboarding and adoption piece that you mentioned earlier, in like how we see senior folks and junior folks collaborating more. Now, this will be kind of a brief overview, and we're happy to show this in a separate demo if you ever want to reach out to us. But we have something called stashes. And so basically the way I like to talk about this, Tyler, is this is kind of like an Amazon shopping cart of like your details. So as you start selecting details, you can find ones if you're about to let's just say you undergo a K-12 project, you can select some more. But then what you can do is you can add them to your stash here. And so this is really kind of the adoption that we're seeing of where people across the firm, junior and senior, are collaborating on good detailing, because you can share this with your colleagues here, and you can basically collaborate on those details all together and allow senior folks to curate and build the amount of details you want for your new project, and train and mentor those junior folks. So that's a huge part of the adoption of showing what good looks like. You don't even need to be in Revit to do this. You can even export to PDF if you want to mark these up in Bluebeam. We package it together in a beautiful little PDF for you. And then the other thing on adoption is as well that I definitely want to point out is basically what we do is we put together and we have a whole customer success team at Pirros, right? And they are just the coolest people. And they come from the industry. Basically, we have a whole onboarding where we sit down and handhold with you the whole process of making sure that your library is in a foundational point that you are comfortable with. And we do a series of workshops and even help you, onboard the rest of the firm for those that you're rolling out to. So we have a customer success team that we can work with. We can work with you on, and they are just top tier professionals. And then the last thing I want to add too is that this little chat bot or button. It's not a bot. It's basically people behind this, where if you were to mention, people, we will be there to like chat with you and just answer. It goes to anyone at Piros's inbox, and these are humans that can answer your questions there. So I want to definitely like say that this is a nice resource that we have at Piros.
That's great because it's really hard to talk about details with bots.
Right.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So, so that's great to hear. Well, I know. Okay, so we've talked about so much. For those of you that, I mean, I'm sure we've only scratched the surface, but what I love here on Piros is the simplicity of it, right? You're taking something that's super complex and super convoluted in most firms, and you're just making it easy to use. And so if you're interested in seeing more and talking about what this can do for your firm, schedule that meeting. Go book a demo. Go chat with Ross. Go chat with Maya, and see what it can do. Because we only even talked about details. There's still a whole family part of this,
right?
That it also works for. So you can do that. In the meantime, if you're looking for different ways to improve this process, right? Think about what Ross said earlier, right? You have to think about the people that you have in place. You have to prioritize your content in different ways. Have a workflow that is standardized across the team, and also make sure that you have that feedback loop so that it's always kind of intelligently being improved. And obviously, if you want to do that more efficiently, check out Piros. This is truly, thank you so much, Ross, for coming on, Ross and Maya, but this is truly one of the best pieces of software that I've seen designed for the A&E industry in quite a long time. And I feel like I see these all of the time, right? I'm seeing different things all the time, but it's what I was saying before. Like there's half of the challenge is always like dealing with the complexity, but when you can make it simple and easy to use and already connected without someone having to kind of manually do that, I feel like that makes such a big difference. And it's also rare to see for someone like Piros that's still, I don't want to, like, we're not that early, but like it hasn't been around, like, we're not talking about something that's been around for 10 years, right? It usually takes that long. So the fact that you're already there is kind of incredible. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to walk everyone through how they can, what the better version of that looks like.
Well, thanks for having us, Tyler. It's great to partner with you, and we always love talking about the industry and how we're solving challenges together.
For sure. All right. So for everyone that's here, we will you'll hear from Pirros. You'll hear from myself as well. There's going to be a recording. We'll post that so that everyone can use that and share that with your team. And then obviously we'll make it easy to take the next step with Pirros if you want to. But Ross, Maya, anything else that people should know before we jump off?
No, I mean, look out for our email. Look out for, any follow-up materials. Go on the website, like Maya said. But again, Tyler, thank you so much for, letting us join you today.
Sure thing. Sounds good.